Jim AC Show.
There are still people, and I've talked about this many times on the program, there are still people out there who will type these, how do I want to characterize it, these messages, comments, posts on Facebook, Freedom Torch, and on their blogs about how there's no way out, that the Democrats have accomplished so much and turn this country so far to the left that there's no getting it back. And you see these same people using phrases like lock and load and keep your powder dry. And that's always disturbed me for a number of reasons. There's a woman that I don't especially get along with on freedomtorch.com. She is, and I'm not going to name any names here, she is a birther. She is a right-wing reactionary. And she's panicking. I know people don't like to be characterized as panicking, but there are a lot of conservatives out there who are panicking. And I could go into the whole thing about birthers again, but suffice it to say that if you are spending time on the birth issue or the legitimacy issue of Barack Obama, you are wasting time. It's no more and no less than that. If you want to waste time, knock yourself out. But it's not a productive use of time to pursue any of this Obama was not born here, or Obama is not a legitimate president, and therefore you don't impeach him. It's crazy. And another big conspiracy theory that is rolling around out there is that Obama is a homosexual. And there's a whole conspiracy network out there, and you can look it up. I'm not going to go into any of the details here. But the fact is, even if he is, it does not change what we have to do. It does not change what our goal is. Winning the election on November 6th, 2012. But lately, there's been this dialogue in a series of comments about whether or not states should be allowed to secede from the Union. Or whether they're allowed to or not, states should secede from the Union. There's a fellow on Freedom Torch who wrote this long, detailed blog post about how the federal government should be allowed to collapse. And then once it collapses, the states can peacefully rebuild the federal government the way it's supposed to be constitutionally. Well, the whole thing is preposterous, because if the federal government collapses, nothing is going to happen peacefully. Nothing. In fact, the guy went on to say in a comment during the dialogue underneath his blog post, he said, well, you know, the red states should simply stop sending congressional representatives into Washington, D.C. What? So this is how crazy some people who are supposed to be on our side can get. And he's not really on our side. He claims to be conservative. He's almost an anarchist. This particular writer on Freedom Torch does not believe in God. He is not at all in favor of political conservatism in terms of morality or social issues. And then on top of that, of course, he's advocating that we allow the federal government to collapse under its own weight. So the dialogue and discussion and debate follows, and people are talking openly about whether or not states should secede from the Union. Now, never mind the fact that I don't believe you're going to get a majority of citizens in any state to agree that secession is a good idea. And there was a lot of detailed explanation why. But if, for instance, let's say Texas wants to become its own country and secede from the United States. There are a lot of things, a lot of goods and services and products that are transported into Texas, and that would cease immediately. So I don't think secession is anywhere near the right idea, but people are talking about this. So then that discussion, of course, blends in with the argument that maybe what we need to do is have the Civil War that is constantly on some people's minds. We need to have another Civil War and fight and die for the United States of America. And this woman wrote this comment: do you all really think it is possible to reverse the course we're on without bloodshed? Well, of course I think it's possible. Look at what the liberals have done over the past, call it the left, call them communists, I don't care. But look at what they've accomplished over the past 60 years, turning this country to the left. For the most part, without any civil war, without any bloodshed to speak of. And all of a sudden it dawned on me this morning before I started recording the program. It takes work to do what the left has accomplished here in the United States. It takes effort, and it takes patience, and it takes dedication, and it takes doing it over a lifetime and another lifetime. It takes doing it over generations. And conservatives, Republicans, Christians are all very impatient. And I realized it was crystal clear in my mind that people like this woman, do you all really think it's possible to reverse the course we're on without bloodshed? Are lazy. They are unwilling to dedicate themselves to the hard work, the difficult work, the long-term work of political activism. And it makes more sense, to someone like that to have America fight it out and have blood in the streets and millions of people die than to dedicate herself to getting the work done. And this ties right back into my social political theory that birthers are focused on birtherism. And this whole thing about Barack Obama and where he was born and whether or not he's a natural born citizen and whether or not he's homosexual and maybe he was illegitimate and we can kick him out of office because he was never legitimate in the first place. Meanwhile, he's in the White House. He is the elected president of the United States, and they cannot deal with it. So instead of actually working on something that will require effort over the rest of their lives and their children's lives and their children's children's lives, just like the leftists did over the past 60 years, that's too big. That's too daunting a task. So it makes more sense to talk about whether or not Barack Obama is legitimate. And since they know that issue isn't going to generate anything genuinely productive, the next step is, okay, well, we have to have civil war. We need to fight for this country, lock and load, keep your powder dry. I think, ultimately, because they don't want to dedicate themselves to the long haul the way the leftists did. So then into this debate and discussion thread comes a man named Clive. And I'm going to commend to you his comments in that thread. They're all worth reading. I don't agree with everything he said, but he makes a lot of sense. He sent me a private message, and I want to read this to you because it's so profound. It's simple, elegant, profound, and ultimately flawlessly logical. And this answers, ultimately, whether or not people should be advocating some kind of bloodshed in the United States to save the country. This is what he wrote, and this is the answer to anyone who claims to have a cache of weapons in their basement, and bring it on. Keep your powder dry, lock and load, here we go. He wrote, I've gamed it out in my mind on several occasions, and that's been the predominant analysis. the one where we, the people, exercise our Second Amendment rights to the utmost and rise up to throw off government tyranny, is especially ugly. Deer rifles, the odd semi-automatic assault rifle, and shotguns against M4s, SAWs, Bradleys, and helicopter gunships, not a happy ending. Okay? That is reality. Now, I know some people have this fantasy that the military, with all of the air power and firepower, are going to say, screw the federal government, we're on their side. That's a big freaking gamble. Now, we might get to some kind of violence anyway. But I've got to tell you that if the leftists can push this country as far as they have in the last 60 years, we can too. And we've got something they did not have. We're on God's side.
If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land.
Now, I think one thing that really upsets people is that they realize it's not going to happen overnight. And it's not. It's not going to happen just because we had the 2010 election. It's not going to happen just because Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin stood up to the unions. They're trying to recall him now. The bad guys do not give up. We can't give up. I refuse to believe that just because the other side is stubborn and belligerent, that we can't be stubborn and belligerent too. I don't like this idea that we have to give up and we have to fight it out in the streets and shed many people's blood. You know, that is the last resort, and we're not there yet. But my question for you is, and not just you, the Jimmy Z listener, but you, the people who are espousing that we need to start fighting for this country and start shooting and killing people. That's basically what you're talking about, to steer the country back towards a more constitutional form of government. The big question is, if you're willing to die for the country, are you willing to do the work that's necessary to avoid that? Someone like this woman on Freedom Torch who tells me that it's not possible to reverse the course we're on without bloodshed doesn't sound to me like she's one of the people who's willing to do the hard work over the rest of her lifetime to steer the country back in the right direction. It wasn't solved in November of 2010, and it won't be solved in November of 2012. The country is like this huge aircraft carrier out in the middle of the ocean, and to turn it around 180 degrees takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen. It's not like you're driving a smart car and you just flip a U-ey and turn around. You have to be willing to work the rest of your life, to train up your children and your grandchildren into knowing what this country is about and teaching them what they must do over their lifetime to fight back against what the leftists are trying to do to our country. And it's not happening today. It's not happening next month. It's not happening in a couple of years. Progress is going to be slow, and you're going to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Look at what happened during the Reagan years. Liberalism was almost squashed, damn near for good. And they didn't give up. They didn't say, oh, that's it. Reagan, he knows what he's doing, and he's taking the country back in a conservative direction. So I guess we'll give up. We can't make this country into a leftist country. And then they got Bill Clinton elected. Well, at the end of the Clinton years, if you remember, once again, conservatism was on the rise. Our biggest problem on our side, on the conservative Republican Christian side, is that we don't have the patience to do the work over the long haul. We want to get back to barbecues and good times. You can't do it. You're going to have to stick with it. But I don't believe for 1 minute that we can't do what the left did and turn this country back in the right direction, in a conservative direction, over a long period of time. Just got to get back to work, doing productive things, not birtherism. Now, somebody on this same thread I was talking about wrote a short comment about agreeing to disagree. Like we should always be able to be civil and sit down and shake hands and say, okay, we agree to disagree. I disagree. I mean, it's really simple. Sometimes the truth does not have two different valid viewpoints that we can agree to disagree on. For instance, if somebody says the sun rotates around the earth, and I'm going to say, no, the earth goes around the sun, and they're going to say, okay, well, let's agree to disagree. No, I'm not going to agree to disagree. One person is wrong. And by the way, it's not rude to point out when someone is wrong. It's the truth. Jimmy Z from the left coast. Bye-bye for now.
The Jimmy Z Show.
Then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and will heal their land.